It all started with a letter taped to my gate, stamped by the HOA, but I didn't even live in their community. My family's ranch, standing tall for over 150 years, had seen generations grow, storms roll in, and neighbors come and go. It was more than just land and wood. It was history. It was home. But to the new HOA president down the road, a woman who thought her lake mansion gave her power over everything she could see, it was just an eyesore near her view. At first, it was little things, noise complaints about my tractor. At 8 a.m., letters demanding I repaint my barn to match her luxury color scheme. Even though we were outside her jurisdiction, I ignored them. Then one morning, I woke up to the sound of chainsaws and bulldozers. She brought a crew, claimed she had temporary permission, and before I could stop her, half of my barn was in pieces and the fence was ripped out. Her excuse: she wanted to improve the lakefront appeal for her upcoming real estate listing. I stood there, watching as 150 years of my family's sweat and memory got torn down like it was nothing. But I didn't yell. I didn't fight. I let her finish. Because what she didn't know is that I had something stronger than her arrogance. Proof, paperwork, and a quiet little call I'd already made to a lawyer who specialized in historic land rights and property abuse. And let's just say, the courtroom was a lot less comfortable than her lakeside patio. You won't believe what happened when the judge read the final ruling and how I made sure this never happens to another landowner again. The ranch wasn't just some random patch of land. It had been in my family since before the town even had a name. My great-great-grandfather built the first part of the barn by hand. Hell. And every generation after added to it a room here, a post there. We weren't rich, but we had roots, and those roots ran deep. When my parents passed it down to me, they didn't just give me property, they gave me a promise to protect it. I never thought I'd have to defend it from someone like her. She moved in last year, big lake mansion. Glass walls, gated driveway. Rumor had it she was from the city, made her money flipping homes, and now decided to beautify the area for what she called modern living. I guess my cattle, dirt paths, and antique fencing didn't fit into her idea of luxury. But what really got under my skin was how she acted like she owned the entire shoreline, even the land that wasn't hers. One neighbor told me she'd been making quiet offers to buy up property along the lake. Another mentioned she had connections. At the county office, I didn't think much of it until I saw survey flags creeping into my field, almost 50 feet past the actual line. Then came that day she brought in her crew. No warning, no papers in hand, just confidence and a clipboard. She claimed she had verbal agreements and that this was just phase 1 of the redevelopment plan. She smiled like she'd already won. But I knew something she didn't. The ranch had been registered as a historic property a few years back, and I had every document to prove it. She had messed with the wrong piece of land. And the wrong man. One of the officers stepped aside with Karen while the other approached me, asking for ID and to explain the situation calmly. I handed over my license and badge without a word. His eyes flicked between the two for a second, then back at me, and I could see the shift in his expression. Still, he kept it professional and said, "Mind walking me through what happened here tonight?" I nodded and started explaining everything, how this wasn't the first time Karen had crossed the line, how I had documented each incident, and how tonight she escalated by smashing through my gate like she had legal rights to be here. Meanwhile, I noticed Karen standing with the other officer, still rambling, waving that fake folder of documents. Around from the body language, I could tell he was growing skeptical. She pointed toward the lake, probably still trying to argue that her HOA bylaws gave her rights to the land that she never owned, never maintained, and definitely had no legal claim to. That's where the real conflict sat. It wasn't just about property lines. It was about control. Karen wanted the lake ranch because it didn't answer to her rules. And that bothered her more than anything. And then there's the bigger subplot. Brewing in the background, turns out she's been pressuring other homeowners too, threatening fines and citations for things that aren't even against HOA policies. Several neighbors had reached out to me quietly, afraid to speak up but tired of her harassment. I'd been collecting those stories, screenshots, emails, just in case. I hadn't planned to act on them so soon, but after tonight, it might change. I could feel the pressure building, not just for me, but for her too. And something was about to snap. The officer walked back over to me after a quiet conversation with his partner. He looked uneasy, like he knew this wasn't just some neighborly misunderstanding. She's saying the HOA granted her permission to access this part of the lake through your property, he said slowly, almost like he didn't even believe the words himself. I just nodded and said, "She's lying, and I've got proof." I motioned toward my truck where I kept a folder of legal documents, maps, property surveys, and a restraining order I'd filed weeks ago, till waiting for a court date. I handed over the documents, and as they flipped through them, I saw their entire posture change. Karen, still pacing near the gate, started to realize something had shifted. She was squinting toward us, trying to hear what was being said. Her face was no longer smug, more like anxious. And then, as if the universe had perfect timing, my neighbor Mark pulled up in his pickup. He wasn't just a witness. He'd caught her earlier that week trespassing on his dock, and he had it all on his security cameras. When he stepped out and started telling the officers what he saw, Karen's eyes darted around like she was looking for an escape route. That's when it really hit me. This wasn't just one crazy night. This had been building for months. Karen had gotten too used to people backing down, too used to hiding behind the HOA name like it gave her absolute power. But here, in front of officers, witnesses, and documented evidence, her control was slipping fast. The tension was thick. No one knew what the next words spoken would lead to. And Karen, she was finally realizing this wasn't going to end the way she thought it would. Just 3 days before the court hearing, I got an unexpected call from a woman named Elena. She said she used to work with the HOA's president back in the city as her personal assistant. At first, I was suspicious, but then she mentioned something that stopped me cold. Apparently, this wasn't the first time the HOA president had pulled a stunt like this. According to Elena, she'd done something similar a few years ago in another lake town, bought influence, bullied property owners, and quietly turned farmland into luxury lake properties. The difference? That time, she'd gotten away with it because no one fought back. Elena said she felt guilty for staying quiet back then and wanted to help me now. She emailed over files she'd saved, old emails, real estate plans, zoning maps, and even a draft of a proposal labeled Lakeside Expansion Phase 2 with my ranch clearly marked for demolition. That proposal was dated months before she ever stepped foot near my land. This wasn't an accident or a misunderstanding. She had planned this from the start. The twist: the proposal was addressed to a private investment group, one tied to a company she quietly owned. Meaning, she wasn't just representing the HOA, she was flipping land under the table for her own gain. If this got out in court, it could destroy her whole plan. But I also knew it made me a bigger target. And sure enough, that same night, my internet went down, my mailbox was torn off its post, and someone tried to disable the security cameras on my fence. She knew I was getting closer to exposing her. And now she was desperate. The court date was near, but I had no idea what she might try next door, how far she'd go to stop me. The courtroom was packed that morning. A few reporters sat quietly in the back, and even some of my neighbors showed up, nodding to me as I walked in. Across the room, she sat in a sharp blazer, calm and confident like always. Her attorney opened with a speech full of charm and legal jargon, painting her as a community-minded woman simply trying to enhance the shared environment. But I didn't flinch. When it was our turn, my lawyer laid it all out. The historics, registration, the photos, the camera footage, and finally, the documents Alina had sent. The room shifted. Her smile faded the moment those files hit the judge's desk. The court went silent when the zoning proposal appeared on the screen, clearly marked with her name, dates, and the investment company linked directly to her. She stood up, tried to deny it, but it was too late. The judge leaned forward, clearly unimpressed, and asked one simple question. If you had no plans to redevelop, why was this proposal written before demolition ever started? It was the first time I saw her panic. Within an hour, the judge ruled in my favor. She was ordered to pay for all damages, legal costs, and issue a formal public apology. The HOA was placed under review, and her connections to the investment firm were forwarded to state authorities. I walked out with my land, my title, and a promise that no one could touch it again. But just as I stepped outside, a lawyer leaned in and said quietly, "You're not going to believe this. That investment firm, they're also tied to 3 other small towns across the state." That's when I realized this wasn't just about my ranch. It was part of something much bigger. After the ruling, the weight on my shoulders finally lifted. For the first time in weeks, I stood on my porch and looked out over the land without that gnawing pit in my stomach. The barn would take time too. Rebuild, but knowing it was protected and that no one could take it away meant everything. Neighbors started stopping by more often, not just to check in, but to share their own stories. Turns out, a few had felt pressure from that same group. She was working with, but now, with her exposed and the court ruling in black and white, they felt safer standing their ground. Alina ended up giving a full statement to investigators, and her testimony opened the door to a much wider probe. That investment firm, it was now under review in multiple counties for shady land grabs tied to fake HOAs and false zoning violations. The state attorney general's office even contacted me for a formal statement. I never thought defending my ranch would lead to that. But it felt good knowing the fight didn't just protect my land, it might stop this from happening to others too. We've since started a small community group to help folks understand property laws and how to spot warning signs of land scams. I've seen firsthand how easily a few slick words and official-looking forms can scare people into giving up what they love. But I've also learned how powerful truth, persistence, and a few well-timed documents can be now. Every time I walk that stretch near the lake where her fancy sign once stood, I remind myself why it was worth it. That land isn't just dirt and grass. It's memory, legacy, and something worth fighting for. And no HOA or developer can ever change that.